Hello, my name is Theresa Lant. I'm a professor of management at the Lubin School of Business at Pace University. For most of my professional career, I've been studying how people make sense of their world and how this influences the way in which they pursue their goals. Since you're watching this video, I assume you are interested in entrepreneurship. So I'd like to present you with 4 ideas that will help you understand how entrepreneurs make sense of their world, how they pursue their goals, and how they can influence others to invest in their ideas. The question that we're going to be addressing primarily is, why are some people and not others able to discover and exploit particular entrepreneurial opportunities? The bottom line, it's all about cognition and interpretation. Let me first provide you with a definition of entrepreneurial cognition. We define it as follows: the knowledge structures that people use to make assessments, judgments, or decisions involving opportunity evaluation, venture creation, and growth. This can include how the entrepreneur herself views an opportunity and makes judgments, and also how potential stakeholders view the viability of her idea. The 4 key ideas I'll be speaking about are: number 1, opportunity recognition and evaluation. The concepts of noticing, who notices an opportunity and who doesn't, are important here. Interpreting and framing. How does the entrepreneur interpret what they have noticed? Number 2 is sense making. That is, how do I make meaning out of what I have noticed going on out there in the world? Number 3, sense giving. This is essentially, how do I make sense of what's happening and what my idea is to others who might invest in my idea? And we'll see that a very important skill to have is storytelling. You're telling stories to stakeholders so that they understand why your idea is a good one. And 4th, we'll move beyond just the individual entrepreneur to talk about collective cognition. That is, how do we make connections with others who could provide resources, provide knowledge, provide ideas, and how do we help others see what we see as an entrepreneur? As way of background, I'm going to provide you with some illustrations of these 4 key ideas by referring to the evolution of an entrepreneurial hotspot in Pace University's backyard. You might be old enough to remember when we did not have the internet, but you might not. Just for background, the World Wide Web became a reality in 1994. As often happens, new technology spurs entrepreneurial activity. Do you think New York City would be a hotbed of internet entrepreneurship? Maybe not. However, in about 1996, 2 years after the World Wide Web was available, we saw media and tech startups based on using the internet, using the World Wide Web, emerge quite rapidly here in the New York City metropolitan area. You're probably familiar with Silicon Valley in California. Well, here in New York City, the term was coined Silicon Alley, of course, because we're in the middle of New York City. But we had our own hotbed of entrepreneurship revolving around internet technology, right? Who knew? So I'm going to be giving you little snippets of how entrepreneurs and stakeholders interpreted what was happening here in New York City from about 1998 to the current time. So let's start with concept number 1, opportunity recognition and evaluation. Now, what science has told us is that presented with the same information, 2 individuals, 3, 4, 5 individuals, people don't necessarily see the same thing. Okay? Now, if you reflect on your own experience with trying to communicate with others, you'll see that this is, what you see as black, someone else might see as white, and you're looking at the same piece of information, but you're not noticing the same things. You're not interpreting the information the same way. So what we see with entrepreneurs is they often notice things that others don't. Now, why is this relevant to being an entrepreneur? Because they often interpret what they notice happening out there in the environment. Let's say, oh, we now have this World Wide Web here. This is a possible opportunity, okay? Others might look at a new technology and say, oh no, not another new technology, something else for me to get used to, or it's stupid, or it will never happen, it will never be successful. Entrepreneurs look at something new and they say, wow, I wonder if there's an opportunity there. Now, people also vary in how they evaluate whether, well, maybe there's an opportunity, but it's too risky. Maybe there's an opportunity, but no, really, it's not a good idea. An entrepreneur is going to say, oh, I think this is a good opportunity. So let me just read you a quote from the editor of a magazine back in 1998, which was called the Silicon Alley Reporter. And this is right at the beginning of when this entrepreneurial hotbed of activity was happening. So remember, I told you 1994, the World Wide Web became a technology that we all could use. So here's the editor saying, 4 years ago, the web didn't exist as a commercial medium. 3 years ago, no one believed advertising would work online. 2 years ago, the popular opinion was that commerce would never take off because of security fears. Today, people are saying broadband will never make it to the home and that content will never make money. Now, since we have the benefit of quite a few years having passed since 1998, we can see that although many people saw the World Wide Web and said, no one's ever going to advertise, no one is ever going to buy anything online, we're never going to read our magazines, our newspapers online. Here in 2015, we can see, well, of course we do all of those things. With the benefit of hindsight and having these entrepreneurs having developed ideas, developed the businesses, making them viable, now all of these things have come true. Okay, but as you can see, there's a lot of variation in how people interpreted this reality of the World Wide Web. Let's move on to concept number 2. It's called sense making. What do we mean by this? So when we see events happening around us, we try and make sense of them. Why are they happening? Who's responsible? Okay, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my business? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Okay, and again, just like opportunity recognition, no two people are going to make sense of their world in the same way. So let me illustrate with another quote from the editor of the Silicon Alley Reporter, who said, when people ask me to explain how Silicon Alley, which is New York's high-tech district for those of you who arrived to class late, those are his words, not mine, how Silicon Alley was born and how it boomed over the past few years, I point to advertising dollars as one of the main factors. So this illustrates how, okay, so here is one observer who, he's both an entrepreneur, he started this magazine, so it's a content business within this new hotbed of entrepreneurial activity based on the World Wide Web. And his interpretation is what is driving these businesses are advertising dollars, which means that he is interpreting these businesses as what we call content or media businesses, which we know are based primarily on advertising revenue models. Okay. Now, someone else might look at this situation and say, well, no, it has nothing to do with advertising. No one is ever going to advertise on the web. Okay, so how you make sense of information is going to influence the steps that you take as you're trying to pursue your goals, and this is going to vary. And entrepreneurs, again, can see the world in a different way than other people. Different entrepreneurs may see the world also differently. So you need to understand that this is an important foundation as an entrepreneur yourself, to understand that others may not see what you see. Others may not be making sense of the world in the way that you do. This leads us to concept number 3, which is sense giving. This may seem like an odd term, but what this means is, as an entrepreneur, you now have the responsibility, if you want your idea to be successful, if you want others to invest in your idea, you need to provide your stakeholders with the stories that help them make sense of what it is you're trying to do. So, the ability to tell stories, to legitimate your ideas, to help other people who see the world in a different way, to understand how you're seeing it, is a very important skill. Okay? So because you depend on stakeholders to provide you with resources, whether it's financial resources or space or employees and so on, they need to believe, they need to understand and believe in what you're doing. Okay, so that's what we call it sense giving. You're providing an understanding to those who are in a position to help you develop your ideas. And finally, we're on to concept number 4, which we call collective cognition. This may seem a little odd because we think, well, cognition is it's in one person's head. But actually, if you go back and think about what we've been talking about from concept number 1, sort of recognizing an opportunity, concept number 2, making sense of that opportunity, concept number 3, explaining to others about the opportunity. Now we're talking about, we may have a community of entrepreneurs, a community of entrepreneurs and stakeholders who are all starting to see, what is the potential of, for example, going back to our Silicon Alley illustration, what are the possibilities here? What business models might make sense? Okay? And so you, as an entrepreneur, it's important to not only tell the story to your specific potential stakeholders, but you also need to sort of explain and help create a community that really believes in the future of whatever business models you are creating. Okay? So the last thing I'm going to do is show you a picture with the term. It's called an ecology of interaction. And don't worry about the very sciencey terms there. But what this means is that the entrepreneur is sort of at the center of this circle and is creating a network, with whether it's venture capitalists, angel investors, perhaps educational institutions, government, trade associations, other entrepreneurs, and so on. So you're creating this understanding, this collective cognition among all of these potential stakeholders. And what this does is provides everyone who might be potentially supportive, either in the way they talk about your business or whether they provide actual resources. Everyone is sort of on the same page in terms of, understanding, all right, this is what you have in mind. Now I get it. Now, going back for a moment, in our timeline, I started with some illustrations from 1998. Silicon Alley in New York City is just emerging. You may or may not remember, in the early 2000s, we had a pretty significant economic collapse. And with that, came the demise of many of these entrepreneurial firms in Silicon Alley. Now, some interpreted at the time that, oh, well, New York City cannot be a hotbed of entrepreneurial activity. Okay? Others say, well, economic downturns affect everyone. We will come back. So again, different individuals interpret the same reality differently. What entrepreneurs do when they're successful is to stick with their ideas, sometimes adapting their ideas to the new realities. One great example of this is, you may or may not have heard of the company DoubleClick. Even if you haven't heard of them, anytime that you are navigating your way around the web and you're getting ads that are customized for you, you can blame DoubleClick. Okay? They originated in New York City, in Silicon Alley, okay, with with the original entrepreneurial idea of, wow, let's advertise on the World Wide Web. Let's embed advertising on web pages, okay? At the time, people thought they were crazy. Now, as of 2005, they were acquired for a very hefty sum, and that, you might say, is a sign of a Silicon Alley success story. Thank you.